The massive crystal amphitheater stretched across the center of Nexus Prime like a glittering jewel. Thousands of alien beings filled the curved seats that rose in perfect circles around the speaking floor. Their strange forms cast twisted shadows under the rainbow lights that danced through the crystal walls. Some had wings that sparkled like metal. Others floated in the air inside clear bubbles. Many had too many eyes or arms that bent in impossible ways. At the center of this alien gathering stood 3 humans. They looked tiny and plain compared to the magnificent creatures around them. Ambassador Li Minji wore a simple black suit and stood with her hands behind her back. Her face showed no fear, only calm attention. Next to her, General Park Hyun checked his watch and adjusted his green military jacket. Dr. Kim Sola held a small computer tablet and watched the aliens with curious eyes. The Zephyrian Prime speaker rose from its seat like a living mountain of blue crystal. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. The crystal being had no mouth, but somehow its words filled the entire amphitheater. "Humans of Earth," the Prime Speaker announced, "you have been called here to answer for your crimes against galactic order." A wave of clicking, buzzing, and strange musical sounds swept through the crowd. The aliens were excited. Many had traveled across the galaxy to see this moment. The humans had been causing trouble for years, and now they would finally be put in their place. The Prime Speaker continued, "Your species has spread across space like a disease. You build colonies without asking permission. You change entire planets to suit your needs. You fight wars without the Council's approval. Most dangerous of all, you refuse to obey the laws that have kept peace in this galaxy for 10,000 years." Ambassador Li listened without moving. She had heard all of this before in private meetings. The Council was afraid of humanity, though they would never admit it. In just 200 years, humans had built cities on 100 worlds. They had created new technologies that made alien inventions look ancient. Most frightening to the Council, humans helped other species solve their problems without asking for anything in return. The Hegemony Ambassador rose next. It looked like a giant insect with armor covering its entire body. When it spoke, its voice buzzed like a swarm of angry bees. "The humans interfere in conflicts that are none of their business," it complained. "They give weapons to weak species. They teach primitive cultures how to fight. They upset the natural balance of power that we have worked so hard to maintain." More alien voices joined the complaints. The Ethereal Collective's representative glowed with angry red light as it accused humans of stealing ancient technology. The Trade Consortium delegate, a creature that looked like a giant snail, whined about humans sharing their inventions for free instead of selling them at proper prices. For 2 hours, the accusations continued. The aliens painted a picture of humanity as dangerous rebels who threatened everything good about galactic civilization. They spoke of human colonies that refused to pay taxes to alien governments. They complained about human ships that traveled through space without following the approved routes. They were angry about human diplomats who made deals directly with other species instead of going through the Council first. Finally, the Prime Speaker called for silence. The thousands of aliens fell quiet, waiting for the final judgment. "The Galactic Council offers humanity one last chance," the crystal being announced. "You will stop building new colonies immediately. You will reduce your military ships to only what you need to defend your home system. You will submit all your activities to Council oversight and approval. You will follow the same rules that every civilized species has followed for millennia." The Prime Speaker paused, letting the weight of these demands sink in. Around the amphitheater, alien representatives nodded with satisfaction. These terms would turn humanity into just another client species, dependent on the Council for everything. "If you refuse these generous terms," the Prime Speaker continued, "humanity will face complete isolation. No alien species will trade with you. No one will share technology with you. You will be cut off from galactic civilization entirely. And if you continue your disruptive behavior, the Council will consider military action to protect the galaxy from your influence." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Every alien in the amphitheater knew what this meant. Species that defied the Council simply disappeared. Their worlds were blockaded, their ships destroyed, their people left to struggle alone in the dark corners of space. Ambassador Li stepped forward. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. She looked up at the towering crystal being without fear. "The human delegation requests time to consider these terms," she said in a clear, steady voice. The Prime Speaker's crystalline form chimed with what might have been laughter. "Of course. You have 6 hours to accept the inevitable. The Council will reconvene at sunset to hear your surrender." As the 3 humans walked toward the exit, thousands of alien eyes followed them. Many of the watchers felt something like pity. Humanity was so young, so proud, so foolish. They had built something impressive in their brief time among the stars, but now they would learn that the galaxy belonged to older, wiser species. The insect-like hegemony ambassador clicked its satisfaction to its neighbors. The slug-like trade consortium representative oozed contentment. The energy beings of the ethereal collective pulsed with pleased colors. None of them suspected that in 6 hours, their ancient and comfortable world would change forever. The humans disappeared through the crystal doors, leaving behind a chamber full of aliens who were certain they had just witnessed the end of human independence. They could not have been more wrong. The sunset on Nexus Prime painted the crystal walls of the amphitheater in shades of orange and gold. Thousands of alien beings had returned to their seats, chattering excitedly about what they expected to hear. Most had placed bets on how quickly the humans would surrender. The smart money said complete capitulation within the first few minutes. Ambassador Li Minji walked back into the chamber exactly 6 hours after she had left. Her black suit looked freshly pressed, and her dark hair was pulled back in a neat style. Behind her, General Park Hyun moved with the confident stride of a career soldier. Dr. Kim Sola brought up the rear, no longer carrying her computer tablet but instead holding a simple folder. The three humans looked remarkably calm for people about to surrender their species' independence. Several alien observers noted this with mild curiosity, but most dismissed it as human pride refusing to show weakness even in defeat. The Zephyrian Prime speaker rose from its throne-like crystal seat. Its voice rang through the amphitheater like music played on glass instruments. Have the humans reached a decision regarding the Council's generous offer? It asked. Ambassador Li walked to the center of the speaking floor. She stood in the exact spot where she had listened to the accusations and demands hours earlier. The amphitheater fell completely silent. Even the background hum of alien technology seemed to pause in anticipation. She looked up at the Prime Speaker, then slowly turned to face the thousands of watching aliens. Her voice carried clearly to every corner of the vast chamber. We decline. The two words hit the assembled aliens like a physical blow. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence stretched on as alien minds struggled to process what they had just heard. Surely the human had misspoken. Surely she meant something else. I'm sorry, the Prime Speaker said, its crystalline form flickering with confused colors. Could you repeat that? We decline your terms, Ambassador Li said again, her voice even clearer than before. All of them. The amphitheater erupted in chaos. The insect-like hegemony ambassador jumped to its feet, clicking and buzzing in outrage. The trade consortium representative's slug-like body turned a deep purple color that indicated extreme distress. Energy beings flashed angry reds and yellows as they pulsed with indignation. But Ambassador Li wasn't finished speaking. She raised her hand, and something in her calm confidence made the aliens fall quiet again. Furthermore, she continued, humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. If the first announcement had been shocking, this one was beyond comprehension. In the 10,000-year history of the Council, no species had ever voluntarily withdrawn. The very idea was unthinkable. Species joined the Council and followed its rules, or they were destroyed. There was no third option. We renounce all treaties, trade agreements, and diplomatic relationships established under Council authority, the ambassador continued. From this moment forward, humanity will chart its own course among the stars. General Park stepped forward and began placing objects on the speaking floor. First came the translation devices that allowed humans to understand alien languages. Then the diplomatic credentials that gave them the right to speak in the council chambers. Finally, the ceremonial gifts that other species had given to humanity when they first joined the galactic community. Dr. Kim opened her folder and began reading from a prepared statement. All human-designed technology currently used by other species is hereby recalled. All patents, licenses, and technical assistance agreements are cancelled. All joint research projects are terminated. The aliens began to understand the true scope of what was happening. This wasn't just a diplomatic tantrum. The humans were cutting every single tie that connected them to galactic civilization. The trade consortium representative finally found its voice. You can't do this, it wailed. Think of the economic disruption. Think of the chaos. The ethereal collective's representative flashed desperate blue lights. Your medical technology saves millions of lives across the galaxy. Your manufacturing processes are integrated into our supply chains. Other voices joined the protests. The Altarian delegate mentioned the human-designed atmospheric processes that kept their worlds habitable. The Centaurian representative spoke of the early warning systems that prevented border conflicts. The Rigelian ambassador reminded everyone of the human agricultural methods that had ended famine on dozens of worlds. Ambassador Lee listened to all of this without changing expression. When the aliens finished their desperate appeals, she spoke again. These concerns are no longer humanity's responsibility. The Council has made its position clear. You view us as dangerous rebels who must be controlled or destroyed. We prefer a different solution. She turned to face the Prime Speaker directly. We choose independence. The crystal being's form flickered through a rainbow of colors, indicating deep confusion and growing alarm. You cannot survive without the galactic community. No species can exist in isolation. We'll find out, General Park said simply. The three humans began walking toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed in the stunned silence of the amphitheater. Behind them, thousands of alien beings sat frozen in their seats, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The slug-like trade consortium representative made one last desperate attempt. Wait. We can negotiate. We can find a compromise. Ambassador Lee paused at the chamber doors and looked back one final time. The time for negotiation is over. Goodbye. The doors closed behind the humans with a soft chime. Within minutes, their ships lifted off from Nexus Prime's diplomatic landing zones and disappeared into hyperspace. In the crystal amphitheater, the aliens slowly began to realize that their comfortable, ordered galaxy had just changed forever. The humans hadn't just rejected their authority. They had walked away from galactic civilization itself. And nobody knew what would happen next. 3 weeks after the humans walked out of the crystal amphitheater, Dr. Yoon Dae-ho stood in his hospital's main surgical bay staring at machines that no longer worked. The sleek white robots that had performed thousands of life-saving operations now sat silent and dark. Their screens displayed only error messages in the human language that the hospital's computers could no longer translate. The maintenance schedule was supposed to run automatically, his assistant Choi Yoonji said, tapping frantically at her control panel. But all the access codes are locked. The robots won't respond to any of our commands. Dr. Yoon had been the chief medical officer on Altair Prime for 15 years. He remembered when the first human medical robots arrived, how amazed everyone had been at their precision and gentleness. The machines could perform surgery that no alien doctor could manage. They had cut the hospital's death rate by 60% in the first year alone. Now patients were dying on operating tables because the robots had simply stopped working. The human-designed life support systems flickered on and off unpredictably. The scanners that diagnosed diseases had gone completely dark. Even the automatic doors in the hospital corridors jerked and stuttered because they relied on human-made sensors. Try calling the human technical support line again, Dr. Yoon ordered, though he knew it was hopeless. For 3 weeks, every attempt to contact human engineers had met with silence. The humans had vanished as completely as if they had never existed. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On the trade world of Vega Station, Captain Nam Jinwoo discovered that his merchant fleet was stranded. The faster-than-light engines that powered his ships were human designs, and without regular maintenance updates, they simply refused to activate. The engine diagnostics say everything is fine, his chief engineer reported, but when we try to jump to hyperspace, nothing happens. It's like the engines are ignoring us. Captain Nam had built his shipping company around human technology. The engines were faster and more reliable than anything alien engineers had ever created. They used less fuel and could travel longer distances without breaking down. Now his 12 cargo ships sat in Vega Station's orbital docks like expensive sculptures, beautiful but useless. The economic impact spread like a disease through the galaxy's trade networks. Human-manufactured goods disappeared from markets overnight as existing supplies ran out. The medical scanners, communication devices, and manufacturing tools that had quietly revolutionized alien industries became expensive paperweights. On the military base at Centauri 7, Admiral Song Ji-hoon faced a different kind of crisis. 40% of his peacekeeping fleet's weapon systems had gone offline when the humans cut their technical support. The targeting computers that guided missiles to their targets displayed only blank screens. The shield generators that protected his ships flickered weakly before shutting down entirely. How did we become so dependent on their technology? He asked his chief technical officer, Lieutenant Choi Min-soo. It happened gradually, sir, the young officer replied. Human innovations were always just a little bit better than our existing systems. A little faster, a little more efficient, a little more reliable. Over 20 years, we integrated their designs into everything we do. The lieutenant pulled up holographic displays showing the fleet's technical readiness. Red warning symbols covered nearly half of all ship systems. Without human maintenance support, we're operating at 60% capacity. And that number drops every day as more systems fail. Admiral Song stared at the displays in growing horror. The galaxy's most powerful military force was slowly falling apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. His engineers could study the human technology for years and still not understand how it worked. The humans had built their systems like puzzles with pieces that only they knew how to fit together. The crisis reached even the highest levels of galactic society. On Nexus Prime, the Zephyrian Prime speaker discovered that the crystal amphitheater's lighting system was failing. The beautiful rainbow patterns that had impressed visitors for decades flickered and dimmed as human-designed power regulators malfunctioned. The Council's emergency sessions took place in chambers lit by primitive backup systems. The irony was not lost on anyone. The same aliens who had demanded humanity's submission now sat in darkness because human engineers were no longer available to fix their lights. Dr. Kang Jiho watched the developing crisis from his research laboratory on New Sol. The human scientist had spent years working with alien colleagues, sharing knowledge and building friendships across species lines. Now those same aliens sent desperate messages begging for help with technologies they had never bothered to understand. His Zephyrian research partner, Dr. Kethvar, had sent 17 increasingly frantic communications in the past week. The crystalline being's atmospheric research facility was shutting down system by system as human-designed environmental controls failed. Without those controls, the delicate experiments that had taken decades to set up would be ruined within days. But Dr. Kang's hands were tied. The withdrawal from galactic society had been absolute. No human was permitted to provide technical assistance to alien civilizations. The bridges between species had been burned completely. Long-range sensors detected troubling activity in human space. Every human world had gone completely silent, blocking all communication attempts. But energy signatures suggested massive construction projects on a scale never before seen. Entire asteroid belts were being strip-mined. Huge industrial complexes appeared in the empty space between stars. Intelligence reports spoke of human colonies that had seemed peaceful suddenly bristling with defensive installations. Military analysts tried to guess what the humans were building, but their activities made no sense according to traditional galactic strategy. The aliens began to realize a terrible truth. Humanity had not been just another member of galactic civilization. They had been its hidden foundation, quietly holding everything together with their innovations and interventions. Now that foundation was gone, and the galaxy was starting to collapse. 6 months after the humans disappeared, Prime Minister Nam Tai-hyun stood on the observation deck of his government building and watched his world die. The sky above Rigel Prime had turned a sickly yellow-green color, and the air tasted of metal and poison. His people wore breathing masks when they went outside, and even then, many were getting sick. The atmospheric processes that kept his planet habitable had been failing for weeks. These massive machines cleaned the air and maintained the right balance of gases for his people to breathe. They had worked perfectly for decades, humming quietly in the background while everyone forgot they existed. Now they sputtered and wheezed like dying animals. The human maintenance codes are completely locked, his chief engineer reported through her breathing mask. We've tried everything. Our best computer experts can't break the security systems. Without the proper authorization, the processors won't accept any repairs or updates. Prime Minister Nam remembered when the atmospheric processors first arrived. The human engineers had been so helpful, so willing to share their knowledge. They had trained his people to operate the basic functions, but they had kept the deep maintenance protocols secret. At the time, that had seemed reasonable. Why would anyone need to know how to rebuild something that never broke down? Now he understood the terrible mistake they had made. His people had become completely dependent on technology they didn't understand, maintained by engineers who no longer answered their calls. Within a month, maybe 2, the air on Rigel Prime would become unbreathable. Millions would die unless they found a solution soon. Similar disasters unfolded across the galaxy. The Centaurian Empire faced its worst military crisis in centuries as border conflicts exploded into full-scale wars. For 20 years, human-designed early warning systems had predicted where trouble would start before it happened. Diplomatic teams could rush to problem areas and calm tensions before they turned violent. General Lee Dong-hyun commanded the Centaurian Fourth Fleet from his flagship, but he felt helpless as reports poured in from the frontier. 3 different species had declared war on each other in the past month. Pirates raided merchant convoys with impunity because the tracking systems that had monitored space traffic were offline. Ancient territorial disputes that had been settled for decades suddenly flared up again. "We're fighting blind," his tactical officer reported. The threat assessment computers are down. The communication networks are failing. We can't coordinate our responses anymore. The general stared at the holographic display showing his empire's borders. Red warning symbols marked dozens of conflict zones. His forces were spread thin, racing from crisis to crisis without the predictive tools that had once kept peace. It was like trying to fight a war with his eyes closed. But the most terrifying development came from the galaxy's outer rim. Long-range sensors detected movement in the dark regions where the Void Hunters had slumbered for centuries. These ancient nomads had once swept across the galaxy like a plague, consuming entire civilizations before disappearing back into the black void between star clusters. Dr. Shin Haeyeon studied the sensor readings from her research station at the edge of known space. The energy signatures were unmistakable. Massive biomechanical ships were stirring in the darkness, their alien technology unlike anything the current galactic civilizations possessed. The Void Hunters haven't been seen for 600 years, she reported to the Council's Emergency Committee. The last time they appeared, it took the combined fleets of 30 species to drive them back. But that was when we had stable governments, functional military technology, and coordinated defense systems. Now the galaxy's defenses were crumbling. Without human tactical innovations, the various species were falling back on ancient military doctrines that had barely worked centuries ago. Their fleets used outdated strategies and unreliable weapons systems. Worse, the communication networks that allowed different species to coordinate their military actions were failing as human-designed components broke down one by one. The desperation reached even the wealthiest and most powerful aliens. On Nexus Prime, the Trade Consortium representative had lost half his body weight in 6 months. The slug-like creature's normally purple skin had turned a pale gray color from stress and lack of proper nutrition. His entire business empire was collapsing as human-manufactured goods vanished from the markets. The medical equipment markets have crashed completely, he reported to his business partners. The manufacturing tools are breaking down faster than we can replace them. The transportation systems are failing. I've lost 80% of my company's value. Across the galaxy, similar stories played out. Hospitals that had relied on human medical technology watched their patients die from diseases that had been easily treatable just months before. Factories that used human manufacturing processes shut down as their equipment failed beyond repair. Agricultural worlds that had used human farming methods faced famine as their crop yields plummeted. The council members tried desperately to re-establish contact with humanity. They sent messages offering huge payments for technical support. They promised political concessions, trade advantages, even seats on the council's ruling committee. But every communication disappeared into the silent void of human space without any response. The few alien merchants brave enough to venture near human territory returned with disturbing reports. Massive structures drifted in the darkness between stars, but they weren't ships. They looked like entire cities freed from planetary gravity, industrial complexes larger than most space stations. The scale of construction defied everything the aliens thought they knew about engineering and manufacturing. Intelligence analysts tried to understand what the humans were building, but the projects made no sense. The structures were too big to be weapons, too complex to be simple factories, too alien to be anything the galaxy had seen before. It was as if humanity had discovered entirely new ways to use technology and space itself. The truth slowly dawned on the galaxy's leaders. Humanity hadn't just been participating in galactic civilization. They had been quietly holding it together, preventing crises before they started, maintaining systems that everyone else took for granted. Without them, the ancient and stable galactic order was revealing itself to be surprisingly fragile. And somewhere in the darkness, the Void Hunters were waking up. The Void Hunters came like a storm from the darkness between stars. Their biomechanical ships moved in perfect formations across the galactic rim, each vessel the size of a small moon and covered in writhing tentacles that pulsed with sickly light. They had evolved during their centuries of sleep, becoming something far more dangerous than the galaxy remembered. Captain Lee Dong-hyun watched the enemy fleet approach through the bridge windows of his Centaurian cruiser. Around him, the combined forces of 12 different species prepared for battle at the Kepler Nebula. It was the largest military gathering in galactic history, but he felt no confidence as he studied the alien warships that had terrorized his ancestors. All ships report ready for combat, his communications officer announced. The Zephyrian crystal ships are charged. The hegemony battle swarms are deployed. The ethereal collective energy weapons are online. The captain nodded, but his heart was heavy. Without human tactical advisors, the galactic fleet fought like it had 600 years ago. Each species used its own strategies and refused to coordinate properly with the others. The hegemony insects wanted to swarm the enemy ships. The crystal beings preferred long-range bombardment. The energy creatures insisted on complex maneuvers that confused everyone else. "Sir, the Void Hunters are accelerating," the tactical officer reported. "They'll be in weapons range in 10 minutes. Captain Lee gave the order to attack, and the galactic fleet surged forward. Thousands of ships from dozens of worlds fired every weapon they possessed at the approaching enemy. The space between the fleets filled with laser beams, plasma bolts, and exotic energy weapons that bent light itself. For a moment, it seemed like the galaxy might win through sheer numbers. The Void Hunter ships shuddered under the massive bombardment, their biomechanical hulls cracking and bleeding strange fluids into space. But then the enemy returned fire, and Captain Lee realized how badly they had underestimated their foe. The Void Hunter weapons were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They fired streams of darkness that seemed to absorb light and energy. When these shadow beams struck galactic ships, the vessels simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed or damaged, but completely erased as if they had never been built. Evasive maneuvers. Captain Lee shouted, but it was too late. The enemy had learned to predict every traditional galactic tactic. They moved through the fleet formations like predators hunting helpless prey, their shadow weapons cutting through defensive lines with terrifying efficiency. Within an hour, half the galactic fleet was gone. The survivors scattered in panic, their ancient battle plans useless against an enemy that had studied them for centuries. Captain Lee watched helplessly as the pride of galactic civilization was torn apart by creatures that fought with strategies no one understood. "Sir," his sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting massive hyperspace disturbances at the edge of the system." The space around Kepler Nebula suddenly filled with new ships, but these vessels were like nothing anyone had ever seen. They were enormous, larger than the Void Hunter bioships, but they moved with impossible grace and speed. Their hulls gleamed with a silver light that seemed to bend reality around them. "Are those human ships?" someone whispered on the communication channel. Captain Lee stared at the newcomers in amazement. If these were human vessels, then humanity had revolutionized space travel itself during their 6 months of isolation. The ships didn't just fly through space, they seemed to dance with it, moving in ways that defied physics. The human fleet positioned itself between the survivors of the galactic force and the advancing Void Hunters. For a moment, the ancient enemy paused, as if sensing that something had changed in the balance of power. Then the humans attacked, and Captain Lee understood that he was witnessing the evolution of warfare itself. The human ships didn't fight like any species in galactic history. They flowed like water around enemy formations, struck like lightning from impossible angles, and coordinated their movements with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. The Void Hunter's shadow weapons, so devastating against traditional galactic technology, had no effect on human shields that turned darkness into light. The biomechanical ships that had seemed invincible moments before found themselves outmaneuvered by human vessels that moved in 3 dimensions while somehow attacking from a 4th. "How are they doing that?" Captain Lee's tactical officer asked in wonder. The human ships weren't just using advanced technology. They were using advanced thinking, approaching combat in ways that transcended everything the galaxy thought it knew about strategy and tactics. Where galactic fleets moved in rigid formations, human squadrons flowed like schools of fish. Where alien weapons fired in straight lines, human beams curved through space to strike from unexpected directions. Within 30 minutes, the Void Hunter fleet was retreating, their bioships limping away into the darkness they had emerged from. The ancient terror that had once required 30 species to defeat had been driven off by humanity alone. As the human fleet prepared to depart, a communication channel opened to the surviving galactic ships. Ambassador Lee Minge's voice reached Captain Lee's bridge, calm and professional as ever. "The human government extends its protection to all galactic civilizations that respect our sovereignty," she announced. "You are free to govern yourselves as you see fit. We ask only that you leave us alone to walk our own path among the stars." The human ships began to fade from view, not by flying away but by simply becoming transparent and disappearing. Captain Lee realized that humanity had developed technology that operated beyond the normal dimensions of space and time. As the last human vessel vanished, Captain Lee understood what the galaxy had lost when it tried to chain the human spirit. They had never needed galactic civilization. The galaxy had needed them. And now they were gone, leaving the aliens to face an uncertain future alone.